Throughout history, there have been various types of propaganda, some used for righteousness and others for more nefarious causes. And whatever causes propaganda is used for, we know that some causes are more potent than others. Not all types of propaganda have equal effect, and in my opinion, there is one type of propaganda that stands taller than the rest: mythology. See, the reason as to why I put this type of propaganda over the rest is because there's never been a type of storytelling that encapsulates billions of individuals under one universal truth. If we look at the dictionary, the definition of mythology derives from the Greek word mythos, which means story of the people, and logos, which means words or speech. And these stories, spread by words or speech, tell secret tales or fables of a culture that pertains to the human condition and the dichotomy of good and evil. These stories also contain themes of suffering, cultural origins, cultural values, and traditions. And even though these myths vary from culture to culture, most cultures share fundamental similarities in that they contain all the aforementioned elements in their mythos. Furthermore, they all contain an iconic figurehead or figures that stand to symbolize their shared values. For example, in ancient Greece, you had Athens praise the Greek goddess Athena, as they valued democracy, philosophy, and the pursuit of wisdom. In Sparta, the Spartans worshipped the Greek god of war, Ares, as the Spartans valued discipline, ruthlessness, and the art of war. And in Delphi, the Delphians worshipped the Greek god Apollo, as in Delphi, the practice of prophecies and oracles were prevalent. This is why figures such as Beowulf, Thor, and Siegfried were heroes of myth praised by the Vikings. It's because the Vikings valued valiancy and strong mentalities. And even if it meant death, they knew their courage would result in the ultimate reward, which was a seat at Valhalla. The point I'm trying to make is that mythology is the most potent type of propaganda because it prompts the populace of a culture to conform uniformly to a set of values and traditions. Now, what does this have to do with Attack on Titan? Well, everything. If you look at my last video, you'll see how well Iseyama presented the ideas of propaganda and the pursuit of truth to build his multifaceted world and characters. You'll also see how propaganda was used to control a whole population and how our protagonists resisted oligarchical control for the pursuit of truth. But what's even more fascinating is how Iseyama used the concept of mythology to showcase the civil unrest in Marley. And season 4 of Attack on Titan is significant for that reason. In the initial episode of season 4, we see Willy Tybur and Megadeth gazing at the imposing statue of the hero Helos slaying Ymir, the devil of all the earth. In this instance alone, we see an othering, a clear distinction of right and wrong. Helos is framed as a virtuous, courageous, headstrong, and a symbol to represent the values of Marley. Then the head of the devil Ymir, displayed at the end of Helos' spear, represents Marleyan dominance of the Eldian race and sends a constant reminder to Eldians of their evil ancestors. Thus, the Eldian subjugation by Marley is justified as punishment for the perceived malice and sin of the former Eldian Empire. As a result of the story told of Helos and Ymir, Eldians are treated as subhuman, and they believe they are deserving of their mistreatment for simply being the descendants of Ymir. There's even an instance when Grisha, Dina, and the young Zeke have dirty water thrown onto them by a Marleyan, who expresses his disapproval of Eldians having the gall to produce children. Even Reiner was rejected by his own father because of his Eldian lineage. And Zeke's mentor, Tom Saver, his wife killed herself, an unborn son, just because she was so appalled by the fact that she had to give birth to a child tainted by the blood of Eldians. Moreover, we see the effects of how the myth of Helos and Ymir controlled the Eldians through fear. When Grisha's sister Faye was killed by Marleyan officers, Grisha was surprised at how unemotionally his father reacted. Instead of acting with protest against the Marleyans, his father was more concerned in not upsetting his superiors and being compliant. Through Grisha's point of view, his father's actions, or more so lack of, was perceived as cowardice and pathetic. But from Mr. Jaeger's perspective, he was just trying to survive. He was too afraid to express his grievances about the mistreatment of his daughter because acting in defiance of Marleyans would result in direct consequences. Consequences such as being shipped to Paradis Island and being turned into a mindless monster for eternity. Even the warrior candidates are Eldians who swear loyalty to Marley and work hard so that they can become honorary Marleyans. Therefore, they are constantly trying to seek the approval of their oppressor. Even Gabi states multiple times that she is fighting the evil Eldians and wants to prove that she is a good Eldian. But what she fails to realize is that there is no such thing as good or evil Eldians, and good and evil is not determined by borders or race. This is where propaganda plays a vital role because it executes a tactic that's been used for centuries, and that is the tactic of divide and conquer. The easiest way to conquer a nation is to make its people fight amongst themselves and conquer them when they are vulnerable. And now we see Eldians dividing themselves by using terms such as good Eldians and bad Eldians, but they fail to discern who the real enemy is, the Marleyan Empire. They fail to realize that they're being puppeted by Marley. Now this all circles back to my main point being the power of propaganda. Just with a myth, the Marleyan elites and Tybur family are able to keep their people at bay. With this one story, the values of a culture's icon is instilled in its people. But just like season 1 to 3, their narratives are lies fabricated by an elite group to control the populace. However, unlike the regime at Paradis, the regime at Marley would enact different tactics to regain the control of their people. And this is where Willie Tybur becomes a huge player in the game of propaganda. Realizing that the Eldians from Paradis are upon arrival, Willie realizes the inevitability of the truth being revealed to the world. So Willie plans to beat his enemies to the punch. He wants to expose the century-long fallacy of Helos himself in front of the world before his enemies, the Eldians, get the chance to. Because the truth from your enemy's mouth is far worse than the truth coming out of your mouth. Willie knows he can frame the truth to his favor by manipulating his contents so that in one way he'll expose the truth, but he can still manage to hide certain details to maintain his favor. So how does Willie do this? Simple. Just create another villain. And the villain he chooses to create is Eren Jaeger. Eren becomes the new Ymir. Eren is the new devil. Eren is the new symbol of evil. And although Willie Tybur fails at disclosing the fact that he and his peers provoked Paradis Island initially, it doesn't matter because the world doesn't know that. And once the Eldians from Paradis invade, the public at Marley will only see violence. And the reason will already be explained by Willie. Thus, that is the power of propaganda. Willie spoke only half-truths, and by controlling the narrative, he still gets his objective accomplished. Willie is framed as the benevolent hero and the virtuous leader, and Eren is framed as the spawn of the devil, the harbinger of ruin, the boogeyman. And does this work? Well, a resounding yes. Willie Tybur is able to unite a world that has universally hated his Marleyan Empire and have been at odds with each other into one front against the Eldians. Just with theatrics, smoke, and mirrors, Willie Tybur was able to inspire and motivate the whole world to fight for his cause. The whole world fell into his lap just by his mere words. But Marley isn't the only nation that has been transformed by storytelling. The same thing is happening in Paradis. In the last video, I retold the events that happened prior to the coup d'etat of the Paradis government and the events that happened before it and during. But what is more significant is what happened after. Just like Helos became an icon for the people of Marley, another legend in Paradis was born, the legend of the great Eren Jaeger, the wielder of the Founding Titan and the Attack Titan, who liberated the people from the shackles of a corrupt government. Eren is now the people's savior. Eren, in a sense, is the Eldians' Helos, their beacon of hope and prosperity, their trailblazer of their path to true freedom. Now this new legend is similar to the Greek myths and the myth of Helos in fashion that their stories inspire values into a culture. However, Eren's story has significantly more weight as he is a real person. This is more similar to historical figures such as Jesus of Nazareth or the Prophet Muhammad, or less mystical people such as Napoleon Bonaparte and Julius Caesar. These are real individuals who changed their precedent or status quo and thus created a huge movement, or in some cases religions, as a result of their missions. But what values does Eren inspire in his devotees? Well, the answer to that question is evident in the actions of the Jaegarists themselves. The Jaegarists are assertive and abrasive, and what they stand for is truth, freedom, and the eradication of old tradition for the placement of a new regime that suits their values. And the means of which the Jaegarists use to uphold their values are by any means necessary. These desperate means are shown when Prime Minister Zachary's office is blown up with him inside, when deviants from the Scott Regiment leak info of Eren's detainment to the public, and when the military police's wine bottles are filled with Zeke's spinal fluid. Even more violently, Flock and his squad mates force the cadets to pummel their head instructor Keith in order to prove their devotion to their new regime. This can also be seen as a demonstration to stomp out old traditions to make way for the new. And lastly, the Jaegarists ally with the anti-Marleyans and detain the Paradis military in prisons, including Eren's friends that once saved their nation. And what is more is that the Jaegarists express no regrets. They truly believe that their dark tendencies are what is needed to move forward to prosperity. And Eren reinforces these dark tendencies by telling Reiner and Falco for his mission to succeed, he had to become a monster, the devil of destruction, whatever it takes for the achievement of true peace and the freedom of his people. And by Eren becoming the new savior of his people, he inadvertently or perhaps completely intentionally creates villains for his narrative. Like I said before in storytelling, there must always be a good guy and bad guy. So since Eren is the good guy, the bad guys become the current regime in Paradis and all those who resist the Jaegarist movement. Meaning, Eren's old friends such as Mikasa, Armin, Hange, Jean, Connie, and even Levi are now the enemy. And this narrative is used to Eren's advantage as the public are in favor of him. An example of this is when Hange is interrogated by the public and an old man asks if he can trust her, and Hange is unable to answer him confidently. She has good intentions, but she is hiding the truth from the public like the old regime, which is something she vehemently fought against. This situation is further explained when Hange thinks back to the words of Sans of the former Interior Police, who explains to Hange that the coup d'etat did nothing except replace roles. Sans explains there will always be a bad guy. No matter your disposition or moral leanings, someone will always see you as a threat to their peace. This is even further exemplified when Mikasa visits Scout Louise, who was imprisoned for leaking Eren's detainment. Louise once saw Mikasa as her hero and was her inspiration to join the Scout Regiment in the first place. However, since she joined the Jaegarists, she is now at odds with Mikasa. Louise's hero is now her opposition. And when Mikasa is about to leave, she sees Louise saluting with conviction, which is a mirror image of her when she was younger in the Scout Regiment. Mikasa, Eren, and Armin all shared that same conviction to take down the government. However, those they inspired are adopting that same conviction to take her down. Now Mikasa is the bad guy to the young Jaegarists. See how quickly a narrative can change? In both instances regarding Mikasa and Hange, they strive to do good, but because of narratives and different paradigms to the public and Jaegarists, they are seen as the enemy. The public doesn't know that the reason Hange and the Scout Regiment kept Eren's detainment a secret was not to cause public uproar. The public doesn't know that Yelena is pulling strings behind the scenes. But now, the Scout Regiment are seen as hypocrites. Therefore, in this convolution, who truly are the good guys and bad guys? This question is answered as soon as Eren encounters Peak. Peak promises Eren that she's an ally and will reveal the enemy. Reluctantly, Eren follows her lead. However, once exposed on the rooftop, Peak points at Eren, signifying the enemy, which leads to an ambush by Galliard, Reiner, and Marleyan forces. Although the scene is epic, it confirms the notion I previously made, which is to say, the dichotomy of good and evil is useless. No matter how good you are, you will always be the villain in someone else's story. And if you're malevolent, although rare, there are those who will devote themselves to you. In conclusion, Jesus of Nazareth and Muhammad had many followers, but were also hated by many doubters, and many people wanted to see them dead. Julius Caesar was murdered at the Senate, and Alexander the Great's empire collapsed soon after his death. Even the greatest and most iconic people to have ever lived in the history of humankind had haters. Therefore, what is so beautifully shown in the final scene of Attack on Titan Final Season Part 1 is that there are no heroes or villains, just narratives.